Bruce Wayne with another one of my amazing stories. So today I want to talk to you about my experience going to Malaysia and also a little bit about September 11th. So as you remember in one of my episodes, I talked about me living in Hawaii. And so it was, so if we rewind back to 2001 is when September 11th happened. And I remember that event very, very well because that specific night I was in Waikiki and we were over at one of my friends Satoshi's penthouse in Waikiki at the W. And while we were there, you know, I just fell asleep there that night. I didn't end up going back to my place that night. It was myself and another guy, Jeff and Satoshi, were all there. And I remember Satoshi waking us up, you know, late that night. It felt like it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And when he woke us up, maybe 1, 2, or 3 o'clock, I don't quite remember. But when he woke us up, he was trying to get our attention about something on TV. And when you live in Hawaii, we rarely ever watch TV. So it was sort of strange to have him bother us up, wake us up to show us what was going on. But for whatever reason, we were up because he convinced us that we needed to see this. And so we got up and we started kind of fuzzily. I remember I was fuzzily, you know, just trying to get my bearings together. And I started to watch the TV. And as we were talking, shortly after that point, we saw the second plane hit. And we looked at each other. And we were thinking, did you see that? Did you see that? And we looked at each other in shock. And right after that point, I remember saying, oh my God, we're at war.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Has been evacuated and the White House is being evacuated. Clearly you're seeing now. However, I'd be very, very cautious.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind the car.
Help me, Jesus! Help!
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And shortly after that, it was identified. Things were happening pretty fast. I forgot how soon after that they had, I don't know if it was that night or later that day, things were moving kind of fuzzy at that point. But at some point, they identified Osama bin Laden as the mastermind behind the attack. And so now the war would be televised. You know, and I'm just going to skip really far ahead through the deliberation, through the September 11th part of it and what happened at that time, because I think that's been well covered. But what I want to tell you about is what happened while we were in Hawaii. And after September 11th, the atmosphere about Muslims were pretty much, you know, not completely across the board, but for the majority of Americans, or at least a large portion of Americans in the very beginning, thought of Muslims as terrorists. I know it wasn't fair, it still isn't fair, but I'm just telling you the reality of what was happening at the time. And even though they tried to sort of help to, you know, let Americans understand differently that it was not all Muslims, in that moment, in the fog of, like they say, in the fog of war, people believed that Muslims were terrorists, a large portion of the population. As far as Hawaii was concerned, having a Japanese majority for my clientele, if you remember when I told you in the podcast about, you know, when I took on the mob in Hawaii, the Beach Boys, if you haven't catched that one, please go ahead and check that out. And by the way, please subscribe to my channels. It's really helping me. It's not a lot for you to be able to click that button, but it certainly makes a difference for me. And also download my Easy Weight Loss app as well. So at the time in Hawaii, you know, as you may have remembered, or maybe I didn't mention that before, the majority, Hawaii and especially Oahu, which is where I lived, there's a Japanese majority when it comes to tourism. And so instead of, there's so many Japanese that visit Oahu that back then in 2000, 2001, etc., you didn't see Spanish as a second language. What you actually saw was Japanese as the second language there. And if you wanted to function and have a successful business, you better learn Japanese. And so I had to learn a little bit of Japanese in order to be able to function there and to be successful there. But once September 11th happened, travel, because remember, these were planes that were crashed into these buildings. So the US downed all plane travel for a period of time. And then shortly after that, even when it was open, the Japanese decided they're not coming to Hawaii. They're not coming to the US because America is going to be at war and they're staying the hell away from there. So it went from having a very successful business that I was running. If you remember, I had that motorcycle dive shop surfboard rental business right in Waikiki. But once September 11th happened and we knew there were rumblings, I remember that they're talking about going to war, and I kept on saying to myself, oh my God, I don't want to go to war. I don't want us to go to war, because I knew what was going to happen. And just from the undertow of whisper about war, I could see less and less Japanese coming to Oahu. Until at one point, it was like tumbleweeds. There was no one coming to Hawaii. It's very obvious at that point that the economy was going to tank at that point. And so during that time, it was very, the thing that I was lucky about for the business I was running is that I was smart enough in the very beginning that when I actually negotiated my lease, I made sure I found a business that it was very, very low end as far as the release was concerned. I only had to pay $1,600 a month on a business that I was making basically a killing on. But some of the other guys that were in the same business that I was in, they were paying $5,000 a month. I remember one guy paying $10,000 a month. And I think there's one guy He was on the main stretch out there, and he was paying like $15,000 or $20,000 a month, which was insane. So when September 11 happened, these guys started to go out of business one at a time. I could still stay in business rather than just, you know, dig into my own pocket, in my own savings, etc. Because the amount of money that I was making there or needed to cover, I could survive from a few tourists coming to town from the US mainland, etc. And I was able to cover my rent, just work a little bit longer hours, and it was fine. But at some point during that time, the relationship that I was in ended, and I felt like it was an opportunity to, and let me back up a little bit. September 11 happened in 2001, and we went to war at that point with Iraq.
Ayes are 296, the nays are 133. The joint resolution is passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
The House of Representatives has spoken clearly to the world and to the United Nations Security Council. The gathering threat of Iraq must be confronted fully and finally. Today's vote also sends a clear message to the Iraqi regime. It must disarm and comply with all existing UN resolutions, or it will be forced to comply.
Militarism will destroy the planet unless we act. Dear friends, don't be discouraged. Keep speaking out for peace. Thank you. God bless you.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
Go! Go!
This is our thing.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
The year after, that transpired, things had settled down a little bit. And so I decided I was ending a relationship at that point, and I decided I was going to take a trip to Thailand. And so, on my way to Thailand, what was very interesting is that I actually, it was the first plane that I've ever been on that was like a they call it double Dutch bus. It's like 2 stories plane. So there's one story that everybody was on, and then they're like, oh, you can go upstairs and sit on the next level up. And that was kind of cool. I'd never been in a plane that there's 2 levels on the plane, and I have not been on one since then. And I'm sure they have these planes now, but you're going back, to 20 years plus back then. It was kind of cool. And it was very interesting, like as you're traveling, there's that island/airport that Japan had built out on the water, and it was completely man-made as far as I knew. And it was pretty impressive to see what they did, that they built this island that was artificial, and they were using it as one of their I think their primary airport there in that area on my way to Southeast Asia. One of the things that I realized, and I didn't realize it at first, but as I was traveling along, at some point I realized that I was traveling to Thailand on the anniversary of September 11th. Like not September 11th, but I was traveling on September 12th. So the next day of the following year, I was traveling to Thailand. And so when I got to when I got to Thailand, one of the things that I remember is going through security. And the security there at that time was very rigid because everyone was worried about, a terrorist attack. And it was very interesting because when I went to Thailand, first of all, I remember that there was a guy that was there that was trying to come in, and the security guy was really brutal with him. He's like, "Where are you from? You're lying!" And he was screaming at this guy, and the guy goes, "I'm from," I think he said, "I'm from Jordan," or "I'm from Egypt," and the guy says, "You're a fucking liar! You're a fucking liar! You're from Iraq! Your paperwork is fake!" And he's going, "My paperwork is not fake," and he's going, "Your fucking paperwork is fake! You want me to put you in prison right now?" And I was thinking, man, this security guy, there has been a fucking asshole to this guy. But after the security guy checked the paperwork, and he waited for some time, and then they came back, they realized he was actually from Iraq. And so they were absolutely pissed, and they're like, you're going back to Iraq right now on the next plane. Okay, and so at that point, I want to back up a little bit. Even though I was in the US since 1982 at that point, one of the things, when you're young, you're kind of dumb and you kind of procrastinate, and I was no different. At least not everybody is dumb, but I certainly was not. I procrastinated on that part as far as getting my American citizenship. I was a permanent resident. You were qualified to be a U.S. citizen and could apply for your U.S. citizenship back then after just 5 years. I'd been here way beyond 5 years at the point of 2011 and clearly could have gotten my American citizenship. But I didn't. I didn't see the need for it at that point. I was getting all the benefits of being in the U.S. and paying my taxes, and didn't realize the importance of making sure that I had finished off that process that my mother had slaved so hard and sacrificed so hard to give me that gift. So I actually, so when I was the next person at the counter, I had a Jamaican passport I was traveling on. And so when I went up there, the guy says, well, you can't come into Thailand like this. You have to, because you're not an American citizen. You're going to have to go back. You're going to have to go visit Malaysia first and then get a stamp in your passport, essentially a visa, which they cannot give you there in Thailand. You have to go to Malaysia to get the stamp, and I think it take maybe 1 or 2 or 3 days, and then you can come back. So I did exactly that. I went on to Malaysia, and at the time, Americans were a bit nervous when I was traveling overseas. This is the first time that I became aware that Americans were being attacked. And because it was fresh after September 11th, it was just 1 year after that, and we're still dealing with conflict over there in Iraq at the time. And so a lot of Americans, when I eventually met them along the way, they actually, and even some of the expats that I met along the way, they were wearing Canadian little flags on their bags. They were wearing little Canadian pins as well, because they sort of wanted to fly below the radar, because Canadians were not getting attacked, but Americans were. But even though I didn't have my American citizenship, I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to lie about being a Canadian. Nothing wrong with being a Canadian, but I'm an American. I may not have gotten my citizenship, but I've been here long enough. I felt like I was an American. I had an American accent, and I was loyal to the United States. So when I went to and by the way, Malaysia at the time, and still is, the official state religion in Malaysia is Islam. And so, and remember, at the time, you know, in the United States, the politics of that moment and the atmosphere in that moment was that Muslims were bad and, you know, Muslims were terrorists. I'm not saying everyone did, but there was a large swath of the population that even if they didn't think they were terrorists, they were sort of apprehensive, they were a little uncomfortable because things were very fresh and there was a lot going on. Essentially in the fog of war, you know, the country and the atmosphere that was going on, it was not very good for people who were Muslims living in the United States. And so when I got to the airport and I'm sitting there, I was at the Kuala Lumpur airport, KL airport, and while I was there, about 4 or 5 of the tallest, biggest Muslim guys wearing all white. They had all white on, and they had on I think it's called, I don't know what it's called for the men, but the turbans. Okay, and you know, they looked like they're very religious and they're on their way to somewhere official. And I was sitting there in the airport waiting for my flight, and all of a sudden they saw me, and they made eye contact with me, and then they walk over to me and kind of, you know, they sat and they're like, hello, and they're talking to me. And within a matter of, it felt like 30 seconds, one guy looked at me and said, "What do you think about that guy, George Bush?" And in that moment, I'm thinking, oh shit, okay, I don't know if there are cameras in this airport watching me. I was not gonna diss my president in that moment traveling overseas. I also felt there's a lot of things that was racing through my mind. I'm like thinking, you know, this doesn't look right. You know, I left the United States the day after September 11th. I'm in an airport with a bunch of guys, you know, Muslim guys in their full garbs there, and it looks like I'm planning the next terrorist attack. Of course, you know, keep in mind that this was a different time, and at that point, you were just as infected by misinformation at the time. I was no different. You know, I was living in the time, and so that, you know, based on the messaging, you're a little bit, wary about a bunch of Muslim guys talking to you, but they were all very friendly, and I didn't feel very threatened at all in that moment. But I felt like I did not want to diss the leader of my country in that moment, but I also need to not say something that's going to piss off these guys who I was actually visiting their country. So I didn't want to get off the plane and get mobbed, so I just, I decided, I took a pause for a second, and then I said, well, each country, they have, the politics of the country is, one person may believe one thing, one person may believe something different, so I'm sure from the leader point of view, he sees the world differently. And basically, I bullshitted my way out of that. I did not want to answer that question because I felt like it was a no-win situation. That, look, as it stood, it looked like I was having the meeting, and also I didn't want to offend these guys either, and offend their religion, etc., in their country. So on both fronts, and honestly, they're very, very friendly. At no point did I feel threatened in any way by them. A lot of it has to do with your own misinformation and your own ignorance about engaging people in that moment. And so we had a quick talk, and then I kind of ejected myself from where they were, and they moved on, and they were friendly. And but for one moment there, it just felt a little intense because they were all looking at me at the same time. So at some point, I got on my flight and I arrived in Malaysia, and I realized it was going to take about 2 to 3 days for me to get my stamp in my passport. And so I decided, okay, fine. I got 3 days here. Let me figure out how I can, make the best of this trip. I didn't expect to go to Malaysia, but I thought, well, hell, this is an opportunity, and I may never be here ever again, and so let me go out and explore. And so immediately once I went downtown, one of the things that I wanted to see was the Petronas building, because I knew at the time that Malaysia, as of 1998, I believe, they had the world's tallest building. So I was excited to see their twin towers. And so when I went downtown, and Malaysia is considered a second world country based on the way we used to refer to them back in the day. And so the U.S. As the first world, Malaysia being second world, and some of the poorer country being third world. That's how they referred to them back then. And so, so my expectation, I really didn't have an expectation, honestly, when I went to Malaysia, because I was not expecting to go there. And so when I visited and I went downtown to see the Petronas, the first thing that caught me off guard was how developed their downtown was. I was really I felt like I was just home in the United States. In some ways, it was not as impressive, but in some ways it was very impressive. And what I mean by that, I felt like I was in a local downtown in the US somewhere. The building and the architecture were westernized design, etc. I literally could have just been in Macy's somewhere in a department store. Everything was just very familiar. And so in some ways, it was sort of uneventful. But then I went to other parts of the city, and it was really cool. I start to see some older architecture there, and it was, some very well preserved historical architecture and things like that. And it was very, very impressive, and I enjoyed my first day immensely. So by the next day, I was asking, I asked some people that evening, I said, where are some of the places that I can visit? And they told me, well, I should go to this one area down there. There's some nice temples that are down there. And also I should go visit the Royal Palace, the National Palace. And so I remember going to this one area to look at the temples. And when I got there, I remember very, very distinctly that there was this beautiful, beautiful temple that was there. It's a mosque. And I saw this line, and the line went on forever. I mean, there was this long line. It was twist and turn of people being in line. And as I got, and so I'm like, well, the curious part of my brain, I think people who know me know that I'm always curious like that. If I see a line, I'll just get in the line. I don't know where it goes, but I'm getting in line to see where this goes. And so I got in line, and it must have took 45 minutes to an hour to get to the front door. And as I'm getting closer, I noticed that in order for the people to enter the temple, the mosque, they were changing, they were putting on these, I guess I don't know the terminology for them, but they're putting on these robes, and in order to enter, and I think they were either putting on slippers or they're going barefoot. I can't remember, but I do remember that they're putting on these robes. And so when I got up to the front, the guy handed me a robe. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to follow along with everyone. So I put on the robe, and after I put on the robe, just before I enter, this guy said to me, he goes, "Are you Muslim?" And I went, "No." He goes, "Well, you can't come in here." And in that moment, when he said that, I felt like the entire room and all the people stood around heard his question and heard my answer. And what was surreal about that moment was that up until this point, I did not realize how I looked. And I always tell people this, that you need to see yourself the way the world sees you. And in that moment, I realized I looked very much like an American. And you may say, well, what does that look like? Well, when I lived in Jamaica and somebody lived in the US for a long time or visited from the United States, it was very obvious that they were from the US. You may not realize, you may, even when you're trying to dress down, people can tell. They can look at your shoes, the type of shoes, the brand clothes. Even when you have on no brands at all, they can see your haircut. It's almost like the way you walk, the way you smell, they know you're an American. And so I didn't realize just how much of it like an American I looked. I had on an Hawaiian t-shirt. I think I had on flip-flops. I had on, these shorts that you wear in Hawaii, and I had an American haircut. And also, I was larger than life. I was a pretty big guy back then, and I was in pretty damn good shape. So all of a sudden, I look around, and everyone is staring at me. And I don't mean in a friendly way. Like they're pissed off, like this fucking American is coming here into our fucking temple. Okay, how dare you? Because at that point, remember, you know, the politics of that moment, I don't think Americans were well liked. And remember, Americans were being attacked in some of the Muslim countries. I'm not saying every Muslim attacked every American. I'm saying that it was something that was happening, and I happened to be in an area where it really felt to me that I could get attacked in that moment. And it was the first time that I felt very uncomfortable and very unsafe. And as I was leaving, I felt like the room was, it's like my head was spinning because I felt like everyone was staring at me. Of course, part of it might be my own paranoia. It doesn't matter. When you get that feeling where you get the hair raised at the back of your neck and you're like, something doesn't feel right, that instinct, that gut feeling, it's like, get the fuck out of there. And so that's exactly what I did. And as I was leaving, I kept on seeing people staring at me. And it was in that moment I realized they probably were staring at me the whole fucking time. But I was so oblivious to it that I didn't see myself the way the world saw me when I was there. And so even though I was friendly, and I'm sure, and it felt safe, it just didn't feel safe in that particular part of the country. And so I went back, I left that area completely. And then after that, I decided to, I think it was the next day, I can't remember what day I did this, but at some point I was told, you know, because I told them, I think I told someone what happened. And I also asked them, well, where can I actually visit? And they say, oh, you can go visit the National Palace. And they gave me some other places that I should go visit. So the National Palace, I think it's called Istana Negara. I could get that wrong. Anyway, I'll put the name on the screen so you can see it. So I went down to the National Palace, and it was beautiful to look at. And as always, I'm dressed because this is the only clothes I brought with me because I was going to Thailand. And Thailand, as far as I was concerned, was very Americanized in a lot of ways. And so I had on, you know, my Hawaiian shirt, my flip-flops, you know, and my shorts, and so on. I went to the palace. And so when I got there, I saw this beautiful building, and it was just awesome architecture. The grounds was beautiful. And so, you know, when I walked in there, I started looking around, and then I went inside, and then I started to just kind of explore the building, going into different rooms, etc. And it was really beautiful in there. But after a while, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, boy, it's kind of quiet in here. There weren't a lot of people in some of the rooms that I went into. But at some point, while I'm in one of the rooms and I'm just looking around, there was a door that I saw there, and I was going to go and open it. And at that point, all of a sudden, a bunch of soldiers came out with, looked like they had AK-47, and they were holding their gun, and they're like, what are you doing in here? What are you doing in here? And I go, what? Yeah, I said, what? And I put my hand up like that. And when I did that, every time my hand would move, they would flinch. And, you know, and at that point, I mean, just to kind of remind you, I was remember when I went to Hawaii, I was jacked at that point. I was, you know, I'm only 5'6", I was 220. I was in phenomenal shape at the time. So, you know, when I'm there and I'm telling the guys, I said, look, I'm just looking around. They're like, you can't be here. And they kept, you have to leave right now. And they're pointing their guns at me. And I'm like, look, relax, man, relax. And I was kind of smiling, you know, like kind of laughing, like, you know, what are you guys doing, man? I'm just looking around. And they kept on, every time I'd move my hand a little bit, they'd grip their guns in fear. And it was very interesting because I'll tell you what I thought I was doing, but what I was really actually doing. So you know when you watch those, in the US, you watch that fucking idiot guy that jumps the White House fence and go into the White House, and then they catch them in there, and they were wandering off, and then they get arrested. I'm surprised none of them have been shot. Well, I'm that idiot in Malaysia, because the National Palace is their White House. It's their seat of government where their king is. That's where they rule their government from. You are not allowed in that building at all. Look, you can come on the outside and take a picture by the gate, but you're not allowed onto the property. And here I am, on their property, I'm not just on the grounds, I'm inside the fucking building, opening doors, wandering around. And so when these guys came, and they came armed and ready to go, for whatever reason, I know this may feel strange, and you may think I'm bullshitting, but I'm telling you, at the time, it's like I realized I was dressed like a stereotypical CIA agent that you see in movies. In the movies back then, you used to see a lot of CIA guys that would have on a little, they would be wearing a little Hawaiian shirt, a little flip-flop, some shorts, and I kind of looked like that guy. Like I was a CIA guy or special forces undercover, snooping around the presidential palace essentially. And so every time I'd move a little bit, they were so scared that somehow, even though they had weapons, they were scared of me. Because, and I'm thinking, now looking back, all they would need to do is just fucking shoot my ass. But in that moment, they were fearful that there was something more, that like, there's no way that this guy could have just wandered onto this property unless he was armed to the teeth, or maybe there were more of us there, or maybe I have fucking superpowers because look how I'm built, I look like twice the size of these guys. So, they're thinking there's something up with this guy. So they were kind of scared of me. They didn't know if they should shoot me or not, so they didn't, but they didn't. It was just a really surreal, bizarre situation. And so then, I was like, relax, man, I'm leaving. They're like, you gotta leave right now. I'm like, I'm going, man. What's the big deal here? I didn't realize at the time. And as I was walking down, leaving, every time I just turn a little bit and flinch, they grip their guns again. And so I kind of smiled and laughed, and I walked off the property. And I think for whatever reason, they didn't arrest me. Maybe I don't know why they didn't arrest me, but maybe they felt like, I don't know. I can't explain that one. I'm not going to try to speculate. Anyway, I got escorted off the property. I left the property and, realized at that point, years later, what I'd actually done. It took me a while until when I got back to the US and I started to look back at those moments is when I really realized, when I saw some guy jump in the White House fence. I was thinking, oh shit, that was me. I did that in Malaysia. I could have been shot. So those were my few days in Malaysia. Other than that, the people were beautiful. The people were nice. It's a beautiful country. I recommend that you visit. Kuala Lumpur is awesome. I would definitely want to go back and visit it again. It's a very tropical in the sense that even though it's in that region, it was warm. There's a lot of trees where I was. It's just a beautiful city and definitely worth visiting. And the people there, as I got older, I realized, look, I was told this before, which years ago, which is that governments fight each other, but people don't. And so in general, I believe that. I believe that in general, when I was there, that the people treated me well in all the places that I visited, except for that one area where there was that religious discomfort there. And perhaps in that area, it might have not been the safest of situation for me. Anyway, those are my story about that. In the next episode, I'm going to be telling you about my visit to Thailand, and that was a wild trip as well when I finally made it to Thailand. In any event, also, don't forget to download my Easy Weight Loss app. Don't forget, I'm Bruce Wayne, and I've helped thousands of people to lose weight and to keep their weight off. That's the part you need to know. There's a lot of fads and gimmick on the market and quick fixes and starvation programs. That's not what I do. We teach people how to eat healthy, go into their local grocery store to buy real food, how to eat properly, and also how to lose weight, and most importantly, how to keep it off. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and download my app.
I was ready to start feeling healthy. I've gone throughout my life pretty athletic, but I got to a point where I had a job where I never left home. My mother, who has done this program before, and she recommended it because it also worked for her. Outside of my mother and myself that use this program, my sister also uses the program, and then recently my cousin also uses the program. So out of all of the women in my family, we all have different body types. We're different heights, different shapes. We carry our weight differently. Personally, I hold it in my hips, while maybe my cousin or my sister, they may hold it in their middle or their chest differently. And even though that is the case, this program is working well for each of us because it is catered to you. It is catered to your body type, the way that you lose weight, the way that you're going about your life, so your schedule. I have a very different schedule from them, and my body loses weight differently than them. And it's very fun to sit down and discuss this program with them and how the foods that they're eating might be slightly different, and the program that they have is really catered and fixed to them to help them lose weight in the best way possible, in the most healthy way possible. So health issues is actually something that I was quite concerned with prior to going into this program. Diabetes runs in my family. We have a lot of hip issues and knee joint issues, along with high blood pressure. My father has high blood pressure, so that's something that I have to be concerned with now while I still can fix it and stay healthy throughout my life. So I wanted to kind of do a preventative measure, and I want to eat real foods. I don't want packaged food coming to my house that are tasteless, and I'm losing the interaction that I have with people when I'm cooking in the kitchen or eating the foods with my family members and all of the women in my family that are actually doing this program with me. I know how to eat healthy without having to purchase another program, not just a lose 30 pounds and call it good. So the coaching was something that actually was a big seller for me on this program, and I'm so happy about it. Not only do I receive educational material and videos that I'm learning from on a daily basis, I always have someone that I can call should I have any questions whatsoever about what I'm learning in these books and these videos. And I have someone that is helping me on a daily basis and pushing me to that next level and understanding my body and what I'm doing every single day, because they were someone that actually helped build the program and have been with me from day one. The moment I purchased the program, the coaches know what's going on with you and they're there for you, and I can pick up the phone and call them, and so someone is always there for me, pushing me to be better and healthy to the point where I know I can maintain it.
To get started, download our easy weight loss app and choose your workouts, nutrition program, and get started right now. Need some extra help? Text or call your free personal coach or your free personal nutritionist and learn one-on-one what to eat, when to eat, and why. From vegetarian, pescatarian, meat eaters to food sensitivity diets, we cover it all. Download our free app right now to get instant streaming access to the best workout programs on the planet, a free personal coach, and a free nutritionist, available on all your favorite streaming devices. Download our easy weight loss app right now.